It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, folks, today we're going to jump in that gigantic sharp interactive board. I want to share my thoughts regarding Canon. They published their second quarter for their FY 2025. And I'm going through their numbers. I'm looking at their financial filings. And a couple of questions came to mind, so I want to ask those questions right off the bat. How different would Canon be if not for the HP Inc revenues and profits? I think we all are thinking about that, right? If HP called up Canon tomorrow and said, you're fired, where would Canon be as a company? What would that print business look like? And we all know that Canon's print business is like 56% of Canon's total revenue, and it's nearly 80% of Canon's total profit. So it's a fair question to ask. What the hell would happen if HP decided to fire Canon? And the other question I'm going to ask is Canon gambling too much on HP? I believe the chairman of Canon is gambling on HP like crazy. And I say that because the chairman of Canon, who is in the chairman's role today, was also the chairman back in 2019 and 2020 timeframe. And remember when Xerox was going to buy HP, and then the chairman of Canon said, oh, we're not happy about this. If Xerox buys HP, that's going to jeopardize our relationship with Canon. We might have to sever ties. And when that happened, I said, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. You know? So, but then I started thinking, if Canon's chairman back in 2020 was willing to fire their largest customer, well, what has the chairman of Canon done since 2020 to protect themselves against that largest customer, leaving them? Because I don't believe it'll be up to Canon. I believe HP might fire Canon. Times are changing. The industry's being disrupted in so many different ways. And folks, Canon is not the best company in our industry. Are they a good company? Sure, they're a good company, but they're not the best. And for some reason, Canon has this reputation in the industry as being the best run company out there. Well, they're not. They're just a major player in our space that's a manufacturer that makes other things besides print equipment, but the print equipment it makes represents over 56% of their revenues and nearly 80% of their profitability, so print's important to Canon. But I want to start out with the end of FY 2024. We all remember that they did have an impairment charge over $1 billion in their medical business. I know you don't see this much written up in the industry's media, right? For some reason, you know, if something happens at Canon that people should be asking questions about, it doesn't seem to show up in the media. But they did have an impairment charge. It did happen. In FY 2024, Canon's operating profit was 6.2%. Now, I know that Canon likes to say, yeah, but if we didn't have the impairment charge, it would have been 9.9. But no, you had the impairment charge, and that's kind of why I have those two pictures there of the back end of a car. In one of the pictures, the car looks great. In the other picture, the car is all smashed up. And that would be like the person saying, well, before the smash up, my car looked great. But you had it smashed up, so it looks like crap. So what do you got to do? You got to fix it. You know, and when you fix it, you better make sure the taillights work. When you fix it, you better pay attention more while you're driving, like who's coming up behind you, right? You got to change some disciplines, baby. Canon, you had the impairment charge. In FY 2024, your operating profit was 6.2%. I wanted to go back 10 years and see when else they had operating profit below 6.2%. Well, folks, FY 2024 was the third worst year Canon's had in operating profit since 2015. In 2019, they had a 4.9%. In 2020, they had a 3.5%. And that was the COVID time. If you go back to 2016, they had a 6.4%. Then I wanted to look at their top line revenue growth. You know, what did it grow in top line revenue from 2016 to 2024? Well, the top line revenue grew by $6.8 billion, over 1 trillion yen. So they had some top line growth, but again, in 2024, their operating profit was 6.2%. You all remember this exercise I did where I took the major players, the conglomerates, and I started in the year 2019. I went through 2023 and I came up with their average operating profit as a conglomerate. Well, I was able to add FY 2024. And folks, you know, Canon's not number one. They're not number two. They're not number three. They're number four at 6.7%. Their operating profit average over the last 6 years is 6.7%. If you look at our friends at Fujifilm, it's 9%, Brothers 8.4%, and HP is 8.2%. And I better share with you the bottom two, right? Because we got to keep up with them, right? Ricoh, disgustingly low operating profit. Their 6-year average is 1.7%. I mean, it's just amazing to me. And when these leaders from Rico get on stage and talk about how fantastic things are, and we're killing it with DocuWare, and all these IT companies we bought in Europe, everything's going fantastic. Well, I don't know how you define fantastic, but an average operating profit of 1.7% over the last 6 years doesn't seem fantastic to me. And of course, our friends at Konica Minolta, I mean, I don't know what more we can say about that. It's just that company, in my opinion, is completely insane. I mean, seriously. It's just, what in the world? I mean, it's like a, are they ever going to make money again? I don't know. Most people think they're going to get, sold off, and I'm pretty sure that's probably what's going to happen. But ladies and gentlemen, if you look at HP's revenue to Canon, in FY 2024, it was $3.9 billion. Okay? That was 10.5% of Canon's total revenue for FY 2024, but it was 23% of Canon's total print. So when I asked the question of Canon, what would happen without HP's revenues and profits, I mean, it's 23% of Canon's total print business coming from one customer. A customer that they were actually going to fire. It doesn't even make any sense, right? And folks, I want to dig into this a little bit deeper, because if HP is giving Canon $3.9 billion a year, that was what they gave them in 2024, we know they're not buying medical equipment, right? They're buying print equipment. I don't think that HP's buying production print equipment from Canon. I don't think they're buying office MFDs from Canon. I don't think they're buying others from Canon, their IT and software stuff. I think most of that $3.9 billion from HP going to Canon is in the prosumer group, which is laser printers and inkjet printers. And we all know that laser printers and inkjet printers are pretty profitable regarding the supplies, right? A really profitable business, right? Well, if that $3.9 billion that went to HP in 2024 was all going into that prosumer group, that represents 58% of the prosumer revenues. So, needless to say, when you start thinking about this, HP is not only important from a revenue perspective, HP is important to Canon from a profitability perspective. And folks, I want to dig into that a little bit. So if you take the first half of FY 2025, the year we're in right now, the total print business for Canon was $8.3 billion so far, right? For the first half of the year they're in. And we could assume that if HP is going to buy another, $4 billion in FY 2025 from Canon, that halfway through they probably bought about $2 billion, right? So still very important customer. But ladies and gentlemen, the operating profit for the first half of FY 2025 for the Canon print business is $1 billion. That represents 78% of Canon's operating profit halfway through their year. 78% of their operating profit is coming from the print business, and 23% of the revenue is coming from one customer, a customer that we would all believe, applying logic, that revenue that's coming from HP is pretty profitable to Canon. And again, I got to ask the question, what would happen if all of a sudden HP decided to fire Canon? If you look at Canon's total revenue for the whole conglomerate, halfway through FY 2025, it's $14.9 billion. So they're going to do $30 billion or so this year. Nice top line revenue. They're going to have an operating profit. It's pretty good. Right now it's sitting on $1.3 billion. But $1 billion of it's coming out of the print business. A business unit for Canon that the chairman was basically getting ready to throw in the trash back in 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, HP and Canon's relationship is a big relationship from a revenue standpoint going into Canon. And Canon knows this. If you go to their financial filings, it says risk. Let me read this to you. Canon's business with HP Inc is important. And as an OEM partner, Canon has built strong relationship over many years. However, if HP Inc decides to limit or reduce its relationship with Canon due to changes in policy, business, or financial performance, it may adversely affect Canon's business and operating results. Of course it would. I think the chairman should say in there, in case I decide to fire HP. You see how stupid that sounds? But yet that's what the thinking was back in 2020. That just never made any sense to me. And ladies and gentlemen, we saw it plastered all over the place. And look, I get it. The chairman got all upset, and I believe the reason the chairman of Canon got upset in that 2020 time frame when Xerox was trying to buy HP is because the chairman of Canon could not see past what was in front of him. He couldn't see past what was in front of him. He couldn't imagine how good this could be. I mean, they would have the largest dealer selling all the Canon equipment is what would have happened. If Canon had done it the way I thought, they should have went to Xerox and said, you know what? Not only are we excited you're going to buy HP, we're going to help you do it. We want an equities play in it. And then they could have secured HP's business forever. And they would have had the largest dealer delivered to the end user. That was a total miscalculation by the chairman back in the 2020 time frame, and I believe that the chairman of Canon isn't doing anything to protect themselves against HP calling up Canon and firing them. And ladies and gentlemen, you know, they could talk about other risks, the remote work and all this crazy stuff, but here's the deal. Why is Canon not consolidating manufacturing? What in the world are they doing? You know? I mean, Canon should have been Etra. They should have beat Ricoh to it. And they need to get in there. Why are they so conservative? This is insanity to me. You know, look, we get it. Print's declining. No one's going to make people print more. But if you're Canon and you could consolidate up the manufacturing of it, and you could get as much revenue out of print as you possibly could, and then take those profits and start really diversifying into other products that you're going to make. I'm not talking about, in Canon's case, going and selling IT services. OEMs need to make stuff and sell the stuff they make. OEMs are not going to substitute print equipment with selling 365 licenses, okay? It's just craziness, you know? Canon is a manufacturer. They make a lot of products. They make good products. Their print business is 56% of their revenues. Canon, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you so conservative? You know, why are you not building the next manufacturing venture capital, if you will, right? Or venture firm. Ladies and gentlemen at Canon, I do believe that you think that you have all the cards regarding HP, but I also believe that HP could call you up tomorrow and say you're fired. A lot of things to think about, ladies and gentlemen, but everybody watching me knows this. Status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented. Don't get stuck there, and I'll see you all tomorrow.